A chosen man always walks alone because individuation is a solo pilgrimage, not a group tour. And Jung teaches that the self, the deepest organizing principle of your psyche, does not reveal itself in the noise of the tribe, but in the soundless pressure of your own conscience, where you confront your shadow, dismantle your persona, and accept the cost of becoming who you were always meant to be, rather than who the world finds convenient. He walks alone because the road of authentic transformation requires a kind of inner exile. The chosen man must leave the village of ready-made opinions, praise, and predictable scripts to step into the wilderness of his own unknown. And in that wilderness he discovers that loneliness is not a punishment, but a passage, the necessary rite through which his fragmented energies are recollected around a sovereign center that is not for sale to the crowd. Jung called this process individuation, the emergence of a whole personality from the conflict of opposites within us, and there is no shortcut through it because the psyche resists counterfeit agreements. If you avoid the solitude of honest reckoning, you outsource your identity to applause, but if you accept it, you gain a voice that does not tremble when the room is against you, and that calm is the signature of a man chosen by something larger than comfort. The persona, the social mask, makes company easy, but it makes destiny impossible since masks seek approval and destiny requires refusal. When a man decides that truth is higher than popularity, invitations shrink, rooms get quieter, and people accuse him of arrogance only because his boundaries expose their indiscipline. Yet that quiet is a holy furnace where he learns to separate the pure metal of his values from the slag of his fear. The shadow, those disowned, rejected, and misunderstood parts of ourselves, demands encounter, and the chosen man steps into that encounter voluntarily, not because he is fearless, but because he is tired of being ruled by undigested anxiety. He would rather know the lion within than be dragged by it, and in that wrestling he gains a strength that friendship cannot lend and the crowd cannot grant. In Jungian terms, the self is the unifying archetype, an inner king that orders the court of the psyche, and to meet this king a man must pass through thresholds that friends cannot cross for him. Thresholds of grief, thresholds of temptation, thresholds of shame, where praise is useless and only integrity pays the toll. So he proceeds with the sober patience of a craftsman who knows that good timber grows in strong winds. He walks alone because greatness is metabolized in silence. You do not negotiate with your calling in panels or polls, you submit to it like a vow. And vows are spoken in secret rooms where the soul hears you. The more sincerely you bow to that vow, the less you need to bow to passing fashions, and the more you become an axis rather than a weather vane. People will say he has changed, and he has, but what they mean is that he no longer changes for them. Once he tasted a life aligned with inner authority, he grew allergic to emotional blackmail, to the chronic urgency of other people's unhealed wounds, to the circus of look at me that eats the days of capable men, and in that allergy his solitude expands from a wound into a power. The chosen man is not antisocial, he is anti-self-betrayal, and this difference explains his travel pattern. He moves toward environments that support integrity and away from environments that reward spectacle, which means he will frequently be between communities, between roles, between chapters, alone, yes, but not lost, simply in transit to more truthful coordinates. You can locate his path by the traces of difficult choices, apologies delivered without theatrics, opportunities declined for reasons that cannot be tweeted, diets of information as disciplined as his diets of food, and a demeanor that stills a room, not by threat but by self-possession. He has made a treaty with solitude, and that treaty gives him access to a quiet intelligence that many never hear because they never power down. Jung insists that the unconscious strives for wholeness, not comfort, and comfort often resists wholeness because wholeness asks for sacrifice. The The chosen man senses this early and agrees to pay in coins that others hoard: attention, time, reputation, knowing that every payment buys him a piece of himself back from the pawn shop of conformity. He learns that the first exile is internal. To be chosen is to be evicted from your own illusions, and that eviction feels like abandonment until you realize you were the one abandoning yourself all along. When he stops abandoning himself, he stops negotiating with dysfunction and to dysfunctional systems that feels like betrayal, so they push him away and call it proof he is dangerous. Solitude refines his perception. He begins to discern between true allies and comfortable addictions, between mentors and managers, between lovers and nurses, and he chooses fewer but deeper bonds, which further reduces his social surface area but increases his spiritual voltage. He becomes a man whose yes means yes and whose no does not require a committee. He walks alone because authentic direction is born in dialogue with symbols, dreams, and synchronicities, the subtle language of the psyche that is drowned by constant noise. When he honors these signals, he finds himself guided by an intelligence that does not owe anyone an explanation, and this non-negotiable guidance often appears offensive to those committed to consensus over clarity. The chosen man's solitude is also strategic. By stepping away from the crowd, he exits the economy of immediate reaction and enters the economy of deliberate response, where he can think, read, plan, strengthen, and execute without hemorrhaging energy to performative outrage. And from that vantage, his moves start to look inevitable, though they were simply prepared in silence. He refuses the martyrdom of pleasing because he has learned a harder lesson. When a man sells his center to keep a circle, he loses both. The circle will still leave, and his center will be gone. So he lets the circle leave, fortifies the center, and watches as a new circle forms around who he truly is, rather than who he pretended to be. In alchemical terms, solitude is the nigredo, the black stage where putrefaction begins and the false dissolves. This phase looks like failure from the outside, but Jung reminds us that the prima materia, your raw, messy life, is cooked in darkness, and on the far side of that cooking is a gold that only those who endured can carry without shaking. The chosen man walks alone because he is willing to feel what others only distract themselves from feeling: the grief of unlived days, the terror of freedom, the shame of past self-betrayals, and he metabolizes these into wisdom instead of projecting them onto scapegoats. Once you can hold your own pain without blaming, you become unmanipulable, and nothing threatens fragile groups like a man they cannot control. His aloneness sharpens boundaries into instruments. He stops explaining boundaries like a defendant and starts carrying them like a craftsman carries tools, plainly, competently, and without apology. Now when an invitation smells like self-erasure, he declines without sermon, and when an opportunity aligns with purpose, he commits without crowdsourced courage. Jung wrote that what you most need will be found where you least want to look, and the chosen man takes this literally. He looks at the inconvenient data, his envy, his rage, his cravings, his lethargy, not to shame himself, but to learn, because each symptom points to a task, and each task executed wins back territory from chaos. He walks alone because the culture worships urgency while destiny requires timing, and timing cannot be rushed by panic. He allows seasons, he respects incubation, he lets ideas marinate until they are tender enough to serve with grace, and this patience makes him look slow to the impatient, when, in fact, he is moving with the rhythm of realities that do not bend to trend cycles. When he loves like a monarchy loves peace, with authority, with terms, with responsibility. He is not afraid to be alone, so companionship is chosen on quality, not desperation, and that standard reduces options but raises outcomes. Consequently, His relationships oxygenate rather than suffocate, and even when they end, they do not end him. The chosen man refuses to outsource fathering his inner boy to women, employers, or the algorithm. He learns to reparent himself, structure, discipline, encouragement, consequence, and this internal fathering restores dignity. He expects less coddling because he gives himself care, and that self-care is not spa-day softness but warrior hygiene, sleep, training, study, prayer, clean fuel, and a schedule that honors the mission. He walks alone because his attention is expensive. He treats it like capital, invests it in assets that compound, skills, networks of integrity, sacred routines, and he audits it ruthlessly because he knows that the market of the mind is flooded with penny stocks masquerading as purpose. Solitude is his due diligence, the quiet room where he reads the fine print of his commitments. Jung warned that what remains unconscious surfaces as fate, and the chosen man would rather suffer the short pain of conscious choice than the long ache of unconscious repetition. He would rather be lonely today than resentful for a decade, and that clarity gives him the bravery to cut stale contracts, take calculated risks, and tolerate the uncertainty that follows decisive action. His aloneness is not sterile. It is fertile ground where intuition germinates. The more he listens, the more synchronicity multiplies, meaningful coincidences that midwife the next step. The world appears to arrange itself around his intent, not by magic, but by alignment, because a focused man attracts the resources of reality like a magnet aligns filings. He understands that most people crave belonging more than becoming, and he refuses to condemn them for this, but he will not join them either. His standard is not superiority, but truthfulness, and truthfulness is simply a daily refusal to betray what you know in your bones for what they want from your mouth. The chosen man is a steward of silence. He keeps confidences, holds secrets with clean hands, and speaks only when speech would add energy rather than discharge anxiety. This discipline makes his words heavy, and heavy words often threaten light attention, so he is invited to fewer rooms but offered deeper trust. He walks alone because leadership is, at core, a willingness to be misunderstood for a season. Jungian individuation changes your orbit before it changes your weather. You will fly differently first, and only later will the harvest confirm that your altitude was correct. Until then, you endure suspicion, envy, and caricature, recognizing that all pioneers look like fools to those who cannot see the forest yet. He studies not to perform intelligence, but to become useful. His reading list is a toolbox, not a costume. Psychology to master himself, history to detect patterns, philosophy to form principles, spirituality to keep the ego in proportion, finance to fund freedom, body training to carry the load, and craft practice to make excellence habitual. These disciplines cost time with the crowd, but buy time with the future. The chosen man is gentle without being soft, and this confuses the uninitiated. They mistake his calm for passivity, his silence for emptiness, his boundaries for hostility, because they have rarely seen power that does not shout. But his restraint is not fear, it is governance. He refuses to leak energy chasing every provocation when his mission demands a clean ledger. He walks alone because he respects consequence. He's done negotiating with reality like a customer service agent, trying to get life to waive fees for late honesty. Now he pays on time. Truth today, apology today, audit today, plan today, action today, and because he pays daily, compound interest rewards him quietly until, one morning, results arrive loud enough that the same crowd who doubted asks for a map. Jung observed that the psyche compensates. If you live lopsided, the unconscious rebels. The chosen man's solitude is his way of listening to those rebellions early before they become symptoms that wreck careers or marriages. He uses solitude to rebalance, more presence at home, more humility at work, more play in training, more courage in love, and in doing so he becomes the rare man who is both strong and kind without pretending at either. He is allergic to envy because he measures himself against potential, not other men. Envy is a shortcut that promises momentum but delivers paralysis. The chosen man blesses excellence wherever he finds it, learns, adapts, and returns to his lane. This refusal to compete in every direction keeps him solitary but sane. He walks alone because he understands that every brother is not a builder. He loves many, trains few, and builds with fewer, not by elitism, but by discernment. When he finds men of oath and character, he holds them close, but he does not confuse proximity with partnership, because not every companionship can carry weight, and a mission strapped to weak agreements becomes a rescue operation that never ends. The chosen man refuses to be emotionally domesticated by chaos. He doesn't enter relationships to be completed. He enters to share overflow. If there is no overflow, he returns to the workshop, not to hide, but to build, because he knows that love without structure dissolves into therapy disguised as romance. He walks alone because ritual requires space. Morning pages, prayer, cold water, training, gratitude, journal audits, weekly planning, quarterly fasts from noise. These are not trends, they are armor. They make his nervous system predictable under pressure and keep him free from the compulsive reactivity that the attention economy monetizes. Jungian analysis teaches that the anima, the inner feminine in a man, must be integrated if he is to relate without possession. The chosen man sits with this energy rather than projecting it onto every alluring face. He learns to create, to feel, to receive intuition without surrendering leadership, and this internal marriage stabilizes his external romance, which often looks like solitude to those who chase intensity over intimacy. He walks alone because he does not mistake movement for motion. The calendar can be full and the life be empty, so he chooses empty calendars that are full of purpose, solving real problems with real deliverables, and this quiet productivity stands in embarrassing contrast to loud busyness, which is why he prefers the workshop to the conference and the field to the panel. His relationship with God, or with the numinous if you prefer Jung's language, is not theatre. It is a private anchoring, a cadence of surrender and obedience that the camera does not need to see. And because it is private, it is powerful. And because it is powerful, it requires solitude. And because it requires solitude, he walks alone without apology. He does not preach detachment as an aesthetic. He practices attachment to the right things: reality, duty, truth, family, purpose. He detaches from manipulation, flattery, and entertainment disguised as education. This selective attachment reorganizes his social world, leaving him in fewer rooms but with more real bonds, the kind that survives silence and seasons. The chosen man knows that mockery is cheap rent that insecure people pay to feel tall. He therefore welcomes misinterpretation as tuition. If he must be the villain in someone else's story in order to remain the hero in his own conscience, he pays the price and keeps walking, because you cannot move a mission forward if you keep stopping to edit other people's narratives. He walks alone because mastery requires boredom, and boredom is murder to the dopamine drunk. He repeats drills after the applause is gone, edits the draft everyone thought was fine, reworks the footwork until it is invisible, and this unglamorous fidelity accumulates into a competence that looks like talent to the untrained eye. In truth, it is simply devotion plus time. Jung would say that the chosen man is becoming symbolic. His life starts to carry meaning beyond himself. He feels responsible to something larger: lineage, legacy, the unborn, and that responsibility matures his appetite. He is less entertained by gossip and more energized by design, less impressed by noise and more attuned to signal. The world calls him distant when he is simply devoted. He walks alone because he refuses to be drafted into wars that do not serve peace. He knows that energy spent proving is stolen from building, that every argument won online is a morning lost to the only fight that matters, the one with your lesser self. So he declines the bait, writes his plan, makes his calls, ships his work, and closes the day with a clear heart. The chosen man is not hard to find, he is simply hard to distract. He will not be at every party, but he will be there when it counts, the birth, the funeral, the crisis, the turning point. His scarcity is not arrogance, but stewardship. He has learned that your presence is a gift and your absence is a message, and he uses both with wisdom. Jung teaches that nature seeks balance, and in the chosen man, balance demands seasons of withdrawal followed by seasons of engagement. He is not a permanent monk, nor a permanent celebrity. He is a seasonal servant. He comes out when there is work to do with others and returns to the mountain when there is work to do within himself. This rhythm protects him from the two cliffs, burnout and stagnation. He walks alone because freedom has a texture he refuses to trade. It is the texture of unscheduled mornings, honest conversations with himself, and the dignity of declining lucrative compromises. That texture, once felt, becomes a compass. You can no longer be bribed by applause if you have tasted alignment, and you can no longer be frightened by solitude if you have used it to become whole.